So we got through the car part. So some of you guys are not actually doing this work. It's really important that you do this next section, because the next section is how you transform in perspective. So if you haven't played along so far, please play along now. So I am going to turn off the entire eyeball for the diagrams group, the red group, and collapse it. We've gone through all of that. I want to look at the people group next. So if you can come down to the next layer group that's in green that says people, turn on the eyeball and click on the drop-down menu to actually open this up. And I'm going to stretch mine out a little bit more. So, really quickly, so I can give a shout out to all those who've helped. These are the three people. This is the person whose file we're working in right now, Jesus Ramirez, Photoshop training channel. Definitely worth subscribing to. Again, Pixel Perfect, we've already talked about this. Definitely another one to subscribe to. And the one I was having trouble remembering is Aaron Nace at Flern. Again, those are the, in my opinion, the three people that I'm looking at. Anyway. Okay, so back to the people group. So this again is more of Jesus Ramirez's 3D work. So this is a person who is in, again, this is our same ground plane situation with a horizon line and the sky above it. This person is grounded and is in perspective. If you can actually then look at the drop-down box for, open up the group that says people. We're going to start more at the bottom of this group. You'll notice if you come all the way down to the very bottom of that group, of the green group, whatever, the man 1 is the one that's actually selected. If you click on man 2, it will actually show you a copy of this person who is also in perspective, but they are smaller and they are actually further back in space. The thing I want you to notice about this, though, and this is true of anyone who is in perspective, is that if a person or if an object is in perspective, the horizon line will bisect them in exactly the same place if they are the same size and in perspective. So you can see that the horizon line cuts through this guy's sort of like the midway between his shoulder and his elbow. The horizon line bisects him right through that. This person who's behind him is also in perspective. The horizon line bisects his shoulders in exactly the same spot. And then finally, if you click on man number 3, the eyeball to turn on man number 3, man number 3 is hidden under this, you will see that this is another copy of the same person. He's actually moving across in the other way. However, the horizon line bisects him in exactly the same spot. So we are going to use this fact to actually allow us to transform in perspective, which we will look at just a little in just a second here. I want to look at a couple of other examples of this, though, before we actually do it. If we take a look at the next person on here, same guy, but he is actually knelt down now, and you'll notice that the horizon, he is in perspective. The horizon line does not bisect him through the shoulders, and that is because since he is crouched down, he's not 6 feet tall now, he's 3 feet tall now. So again, the horizon line would not bisect him. If he was actually up here, like this, he would not be in perspective. And you can look at this, and you can see the difference in this person and the one that, the very first figure that we had. He's the same size as the person who's crouched down, but the person who's crouched down is clearly out of perspective right now. Wouldn't you agree? When you look at this, doesn't it look weird? It's odd. There's something not quite right. It's what?
If he stood up, he'd be a giant.
Exactly, exactly. So this is what perspective is all about. Again, if you actually turn on, let me go back and turn on this, get this guy back where he was. Again, if you look at the height between his shoulders and the horizon line, and then you do another version of him that is deeper into space, that relationship of the space above his shoulders will always happen. So no matter how far I push the guy who's squatted down back into space, he will never cross the horizon line. It doesn't matter how far he goes back. he will simply get smaller and smaller and smaller, but there will still always be that space above above his shoulders before you hit the horizon line, if he is in perspective. If we go to the last person here, you can see he's way back here in space. Again, it's just another version of this guy that's actually way back here in space. He is also still in perspective, and you can see that space is still above him. If we go to the next frame up, it's woman number 1. Now you can see that the horizon line intersects her at a different place. She is in perspective. She is at the same place. She's right next to the first man that we actually started with, but you can see the horizon line bisects her more up in her shoulder area. And the reason this exists is because she's shorter than the guy. Now, this may be cliche that, oh yeah, the guy's always taller than the girl. I'm just going to ask you guys not to have that debate with me right now, and let's just for argument's say the guy's 6'2", the girl's 5'10", and this is the relationship that they would, this is the relationship the horizon line would actually have. Again, it would bisect her lower down because she's not as tall. However, if we push her, I'm going to click on woman number 2, back in perspective, the horizon line would bisect the second woman that's further back here in the very same spot as it bisects the one that's up here in the front. Because again, this is in perspective. And then finally, if we actually click on the top one, the woman on the box, you can see that the horizon line now, she's further back than the first woman was, but the horizon line is now bisecting her through her waist. And that's because she's standing on top of a box. She is no longer 5'10". She's actually now, if the box is 2 feet tall, she's now 8'10", and that's why the horizon line is bisecting her at a lower point, but she is still in perspective. Is this making sense to everyone? Okay, you can turn off all the eyeballs for just the woman. I want you to keep the guy on really quickly here for just a second. You can also turn off the guys that are squatting down. What I just want to do is work here with the very first guy. So I'm going to select the first guy right here, the man number 1, the one who's in here in the very, very front. So this is something I need you please to do with me right now, because this again is how you transform in perspective. So I'm going to hit Command T to bring up the transform dialog box, and the way you transform in perspective is very specific. That's why we use the old method of transform instead of the new method that Photoshop introduced a year and a half ago. Again, it does not work if you're trying to do this kind of work. But again, this is so advanced, Photoshop does not give a shit about whether we can do this or not anymore. It doesn't seem like, but that's just another rant that I'll go on. But at any rate, to do this, you need to know where the horizon line is, and you need to take this anchor point and put it onto the horizon line. So I'm going to grab this anchor point, and I'm going to drag it back, and I'm going to stick it on the horizon line on the right-hand side. Then to transform in perspective, you hold down the Shift key and the Option key, and then you grab one of the corner handles for that's around the transform dialog box, and you start to push in the direction of, start to push him back. What you'll notice as I push him back is that the horizon line continues to bisect him exactly in the spot where it's going through his shoulders. And I can take this all the way back until this is some teeny little guy in the background back there. Hit the OK button, and he is still in perspective. I have now transformed him in perspective. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that to bring him back to the foreground again. And we're going to do the same trick again. Command T. This time I'm going to put the anchor point on the left side. So I'm going to bring it over here onto the left-hand side. And I'm going to, again, hold down the Shift key and the Option key. I'm going to click on the control corner on the right side of this guy and start to push back. And you can actually see when I get him actually very close to where the other one is, he is exactly the same size as the other guy. He is being transformed in perspective. And if I say OK right now, he is actually transformed in perspective. If I hit Command T again to transform him again, I can actually grab that anchor point. This time I'm actually going to put it on the right side of him, and I'm going to continue to transform him in perspective. Hold down the Shift and the Option key, grab the other corner handle, and start to push him back. He stays in perspective for all of these things. So again, this is how you transform in perspective. I'm going to go back, Command Option Z twice till I get him back here in the very beginning. We are going to now send him directly away from the camera. To do that, Command T to transform. This time put the anchor point literally right behind him. I'm going to put it right in the middle of his chest, but I'm looking at the horizon line. Where's the horizon line on here? If you have trouble spotting the horizon line, as long as you've got your ruler showing, you can actually drag a guideline down onto the horizon line so that you establish that point, and now you know for certain that you are right on that mark. And now again, hold down the Shift key and the Option key, grab one of the corners, it doesn't matter which one you grab, and start to push, and you will send him straight back away from the camera. I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. I'm going to hide this guideline by hitting Command H. He is still in perspective. If you hit Command Z to undo that, he comes back up. We're going to do this one last time. Again, Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. Make sure that the anchor point goes on the horizon line. And now this time I'm going to bring him forward to the camera. So again, hold down the Shift key and the Option key and simply click on the corner point and drag forward, and this is how you pull him up into perspective. Again, the horizon line still bisects him exactly where it should be. So this is how you can actually adjust people in your scenes and your composites to actually be in perspective with the background as it exists. Does this make sense to everyone? All right. As we scroll down, there's one more exercise that we need to do in this. This is going to be with real people now. You can collapse the green people group, turn off the eyeball, and go into the purple group, samples, and actually click to actually drop this, the whole thing open here. I'm going to reset my workspace because I don't need my layers to be over anymore. Okay, when you look at this image, is it correct? This is now the real deal. This is now what you guys are going to be doing. This is not or any version of this. This is no longer, three-dimensional drawings. This is not that kind of stuff, whatever. This is real photographs. Is this correct? When you look at this, does it feel right? Mitchell's shaking his head no. You guys have got to be looking at this and thinking something's wrong. It's not major. It's not like, oh my God, this is like, that's impossible. That guy would be 30 feet tall. That's just not possible, whatever. But when you look at it, it doesn't feel right. So we need to figure this out. So where is the horizon line of the beach? It's pretty obvious where the horizon line is. It's the horizon line, right? I mean, that's the simplest question I'm going to ask in this class ever, right? Where's the guy? Oh, he's right here in the middle. Okay, anyway, that's the horizon line, right? But where's the horizon line on the guy? Well, if you open up the man, it's the man group right here. Just open this up. You'll actually see, I thought I could get away with having this layer. Let me just make my layers palette bigger. You can see that he's actually been knocked out. He's got a layer mask on him. To hide the layer mask, hold down the Shift key and simply click on the layer mask and it hides it. And now you can see where the horizon line is for the guy in the image. And the horizon line is bisecting him just above his knees. Make sense? So in your composites, your perspectives have to match. And these do not match right now. One's got the horizon line way up, one's got it way down. So to fix this, you can move either the guy or the beach. It's going to be easier for us to move the beach. So hold down the Shift key and click on the mask again to put him back. And then come down to the beach and click on the beach. Hit the V key to get the move tool and simply drag the beach down until it's just above his knees, until that horizon line is just above his knees. He is now in perspective. And this looks infinitely better and more believable, wouldn't you agree? To see the difference, Do a snapshot of this. This is snapshot 1, will be the correct one. Hit Command Z to move him back to where he was before and hit another snapshot, and you can actually then go to the top of your history palette, and you can go back and forth between the two really quick. And you can see in one case he is in perspective, in the other case he isn't. In one case the comp is believable. Again, he's missing his shadows, he's missing a number of things here, but in one case it's believable, in the other case not even close. Does this make sense to everyone? Is this working for you guys? A lot of times you need to just be made aware of this stuff. Again, perspective may be brand new to all of you or some of you. That's okay, but practice with this will get you there. But if you ignore it, your composites will fall apart. I'm promising you that. Are we good on this part? Turn off the eyeball for the beach and turn on the eyeball for the city. This guy, is he in perspective? Why do you say that? Exactly. The horizon line of the city matches the horizon line of the guy. We can actually transform this guy in perspective now. So select the guy. Make sure that you select that layer. Hit Command T to transform the guy. Now you'll see here again, my control handles have actually gone outside of my frame. I don't want that to actually happen, so I'm going to cancel the transform by clicking on the little circle with the slash through it. I'm going to hit the F key to go to the pasteboard, so now I will have my control handles, and now I'm going to hit Command T again to bring up the transform dialog box. I'm going to take the anchor point and I'm going to drop it down. I'm actually going to take him over to the right side of the city. You'll notice when I'm doing this, if you want your transform in perspective to move to the right, you put the anchor point to the right. If you want it to move to the left, you put the anchor point to the left. If you want it to go straight away from you, you put it right behind the figure. And that's also what he'll come actually straight to you as well. So we're going to actually send him off to the other direction first. So I'm going to put the anchor point right on the horizon line, hold down the Shift key and the Option key, and click on this lower corner, and I can send this guy out into space. Now, he's Spider-Man or something, but anyway, he is out there in perspective. Even better, or at least more useful in my opinion, hold down the Shift and the Option key and drag in the other direction. This is how you would pull him closer to the camera. But how many of you thought, I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this because it's jumped way off my screen. Ooh. How many of you would have realized that this would be the view that you would actually see of this guy if we pulled him back closer to the camera and he was still in perspective? Most of you would simply have drug it back, made him bigger, and put it wherever you wanted to. He would not be in perspective. Is this making sense, everyone? Command Z to undo that part. Command Option Z to get him back to where he was in the beginning. He doesn't seem to want to go back to there in the beginning. So I'm hit the F key once, F key a second time. I'm going to close this file. I am not going to save it and open it right back up again. And anchor this back and go all the way down. So that's with the city. I want you to turn off the city and go to the next one down. And this is him in a train station. So, is this in perspective? Well, the first thing we need to do is establish the horizon line of our landscape. So to do that, turn the eyeball of the guy off. So I'm just going to temporarily turn him off. Remember, converging lines land on the vanishing point, and the vanishing point is the horizon line. Are there converging lines in this image? Well, of course there are. So different people do this different ways. I'm just going to show you how I do it. Some people will do this using a brush, an empty layer and a brush and a tool. I use it using the pen tool. It's just easier for me to work, and it's faster, and then I can get rid of the path. So what I want to do, all you need is two converging lines. It does not matter which two you pick. So for instance, You can see there's one that runs along the edge of this, you know, the whatever's, I think there's a staircase on this side, but it's whatever's separating this from the staircase is a converging line. The lights are converging lines. The paint decals on the train are converging lines. The yellow warning line is a converging line. The railroad tracks are converging lines. If you could actually see the tops of the doors as they go back along the train would also be converging lines. Even the train that's on the other side, these are all converging lines that are all going to land in the same spot. I'm going to go to my pasteboard again, so I'm going to hit the F key because, again, this allows me to get the pen tool beyond the image itself, which sometimes can help me. It won't really matter here, but it will help me. So I'm going to hit the P key to get the pen tool, and I'm going to actually do my first converging line along this marble barrier here. So I'm going to click on one spot, and I'm simply going to drag my pen tool all the way to the other side of my image. Again, I'm not clicking and dragging, I'm just going to do another part. But what I want to do is make sure that I get the pen to run right along the edge of that marble thing. That's what I'm actually trying to do. And I'm then simply going to click to set another point out there. So I've got one of my converging lines right now. I'm going to do another one, and I'm simply going to use the railroad tracks to do it. Actually, I take that back. Yeah, I'll do the railroad tracks to do it. So I'm going to click on the railroad track right now, and again, I'm going to run this down till make sure that the line is tracing along the railroad track, and it is right here, and I'm just going to click for another point. Where those two things intersect is the horizon line of this image. To mark it, I'm going to actually come up here to my ruler, and I'm simply going to click and drag a guideline down till it runs right through the intersection of where those two lines met, where my converging lines actually met. And then I'm going to go to my to my path panel and simply throw the path away. It's done all its work. All I wanted to do was get the horizon line, and that's where the horizon line is. Now, looking at it now, you can sort of tell that. But in certain cases, you may not be able to tell this. And if you've got converging lines, it will tell you exactly where the vanishing point is. Are we good on this? So now I'm going to turn my guy back on. So I'm going to go to my layers palette and turn the visual of the guy back on. And you can see right now that the problem that I've got in this is that he is not going to be, the horizon lines here do not match. Remember, the horizon line on this guy is just above his knees. So to get the guy in the right spot, I'm going to select the man group layer here. I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool, and I'm going to drag him up. He is now in perspective, but he's also now, well, if that train is, let's say the train is 15 feet tall, he's now 18 feet tall. Why? The problem that we have here is these images were both shot so out of perspective relative to one another, they will never come into perspective. So the train, if you look at the train, if you imagine that this wall right over here is like probably, again, stand up. Where is that rail? You can put your hand on the rail, right? So the rail's 4 feet tall, right? About. So the vantage point that they shot on that train, somebody's standing on a ladder, or they're up. They're like 10 feet tall, something like that. The guy, on the other hand, so the person who's taking the picture of the train is like up here looking out. The person who actually shot the guy is way down here looking up like this. Those differences in the perspectives of your camera are so extreme, you will never get these two to go together. They simply will not. Now you can try all sorts of things to fake it, but the only way to fix this is to either reshoot the guy or to reshoot the train. Or to pick a different background. Does this make sense? All right, I'm going to try to cheat this, and you'll see. I mean, I'll get as close as I possibly can. It will certainly be better than this, because this guy is now, like I said, he's almost 20 feet tall, and that would never happen. So I am going to hit Command-Z to undo that. I'm not going to move him at all. I'm going to completely ignore that. I'm going to accept the fact that my perspectives do not match and never will match. There's no going in and using the transform tools of the train place to change its perspective. You will never do that. It will never work. This is just the cards that you've been dealt here. But we can actually at least make him look reasonable in this space. So to do that, I'm going to get rid of this guideline. I'm going to come up to the View menu, down to Clear Guides. So I know where the horizon line is, and it doesn't matter to me right now. I am going to transform the guy, so make sure that you have the guy selected, Command T, and I'm simply going to make him smaller. So I'm going to click on the link between the width and the height, and I'm going to make him smaller. And what I'm really trying to do is get him where I feel like he is next to the door. So again, I'm going to continue to drag this down. So he will not be in perspective, but at least he will be scaled correctly. Because right now, that's the big problem I've got. He's 20 feet tall. So I'm going to bring this down, and I'm actually going to put him down so that his foot is laying on the edge of the door going into the train. Then you guys have been on trains before. Is this guy scaled right to the train? No. He'd bang his head on the door. The door is actually, people when they get on a train can actually look through the window. So this is nowhere near that. He's way too big. So again, I'm going to make him smaller, but this is again the problem that you run into. When you do it, it's doing that transform around the transform anchor. And it's, again, you can go through iterations. You can make him smaller, move him back, make him smaller again, move his foot back, whatever. But if you simply put the anchor point on his foot so that now when we scale it, his foot and the bottom of the door entryway here will not move. And then again, use your scrubby slider to actually scale him to the way he would be for this door. And so for me, it's down about this area right in here. He is now scaled correctly for this door. Those doors are gigantic, right? Maybe a touch bigger, something like that. So he's now scaled right for the train. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. And then again, that's the scale he would be. If I drop him down on the ground right next to this, I haven't moved him any closer to the camera. I haven't moved him any further away. He's not going to change in scale. So I'm simply going to drop him down onto the ground right here. He is at least now scaled correctly to the train. But the problem we run into now is this. I'm going to double click on my hand to kick all the way back out. If we now try to transform him in perspective using the horizon line that we know exists for the train, that's the first one we'll go for. So I'm going to drag my two horizon lines out. One is right in the middle of that sort of black void that's in the background. That's where our one for the train station was. And I'm going to drag another one that's right above his knees. This is where the one is for him as a figure. And then we're going to transform him in both and see if either one of them actually works. So the guy's selected, Command T. And I'm simply going to drop the guideline down, the anchor point down to the guideline that is his vanishing point, his horizon line right above his knees. Hold down the Shift key and the Option key and click on one of these markers and drag it forward. And you can actually see that when he comes to the front of the train, he's still too tall for this train. There's no question about this part. I mean, look at the difference in him. He's like, he's now, well, he's not quite at the window area, so let me actually get him to the window area. Hang on one second. Oh, sorry, wrong one. Yeah, I mean, at the front of the train here, it's ridiculous. He's gigantic. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. And instead, I'm going to put the anchor point up onto the vanishing point of the landscape instead. So I'm going to actually put it up at the top, hold down the Shift key and the Option key, and actually click and pull this back. And now you can see he's a little bit better in this space. That's a little bit more, but he also looks a little bit too small for me here in this. I mean, I'm not really like believing that part of it as well. And this is the problem. You know, you can do this all day long, but it's not going to be perfect. So at the end of this all, let's say that he's scaled now to the size that you feel like he should be. I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this, but he's going to be off in this. I'm going to hit Command H to hide those guidelines. And I think he probably needs to be, he's too small for being this close to the front of the train. So I'm going to hit the V key and I'm simply going to push him further back into space. But again, this is a losing battle here. You can do the best that you can do. And at some point you look at this and you'll say, well, that's sort of okay, kind of, maybe it's not the end of the world, but is this making sense to everyone? Are there questions about this? All right. So we're going to open up one more file. It's, yeah, we're going to open up one more file. You can close this up, hit the F key once, hit the F key a second time to get rid of it. So we are going to go after all of this, and then we're going to also add matching tone, color, and saturation on this last move. So on this last file, I am begging you guys to please do this file with me. Number one, we're going to make a series of actions that will build check layers for you. Anybody in this room, again, I don't know where you guys are all at. Anybody in this room ever use check layers, even know what a check layer really is? Anyone? Well, so anyway, it will help to actually build this thing so that you don't have to build your own check layers every single time that you're going to do it. And clearly nobody in this room knows what a check layer is, so we'll take it from the top. Okay, so the last image that I want to open and work with on you for this part right here is, again, so if we go to your week 9 folder, it's a folder called Pix Imperfect Composite. And inside there is you should have 2 files in here. You should have a Lady in Red and a Night Street. Do you have both of those? Open those both into Photoshop for me. You can bring them open at the same time. So again, I just selected both of them, and I'm going to just drag them on top of Photoshop. I'm also going to quit Bridge. Maybe give me a little bit more memory. Okay. So what we've got here is we've got a street scene, and we've got a girl and this again, this is from Pix Imperfect. If you actually go on there, you'll see these 2 exact images used in basically a compositing situation scenario like this. I'm going to go a little bit more into depth about what we're doing here and show you a couple of other things. So if you refer back to the Pix Imperfect version of this, it will be different, but nonetheless, a lot of it will be the same. So basically, I want this girl and this background. Did I give you the file that already had? No, actually, hopefully I did. Do you guys have, if you look in your channels palette, do you already have the knockout made? Okay, no? Yes or no? Yes. Kennedy, yours isn't? Oh, okay, you're just fucking with me? Okay, just kidding, just kidding, just kidding. Okay, so first things first, though, I want to establish the horizon line of the girl, because I need to know where that is, and then I'm going to establish a horizon line and see if I can at least get these things into perspective. So we'll sort of see how this goes. So again, to figure the horizon line of the girl, I'm going to hit the P key to get the pen tool. I'm going to hit the F key to go to the pasteboard so that I can, again, use my pen tool beyond the pasteboard. I'm going to click on one side of the rail and drag a line all the way back out of my image and get it to line up so that it traces exactly the edge of the rail. I'm going to click once there, and then I'm going to come all the way back over. I'm just setting down other points so that I can get to the other rail without it being a confusing set of lines to me. And I'm going to click on the other side here, and I'm going to drag that so it's the other rail, and I'm going to drag that all the way back. And you can see now that the horizon line is basically going right through her head, roughly at her eyeballs. And that's all I really need to know. I don't need to drag guidelines down. It was like the guy. We knew that the horizon line was above his knees. The horizon line of this girl is actually up at her eyeballs. So that's the vanishing point of this image would be in that spot right behind her. So at least now I know that part of it. Again, I'm going to go to my path palette, and I'm going to throw that away. I don't need it anymore. I know where it is. It's basically her eyeballs. I am going to load the knockout. So again, do not select the knockout channel. It'll look like this, and that's not what you want to do. Just hover over the thumbnail of the knockout, hold down the Command key, and click. It will load this as a selection. Come back over to your background layer here, and let's do a new layer first. So hit Command D to deselect. Go to your background layer, hit Command J to make a copy. Again, I don't want you guys, everything we do, we need a way to back out of. So I don't want to do anything like masking, throwing a layer mask on my virgin copy of anything. So anyway, I've got my copy made. Now I'm going to load the knockout again. So hover over the thumbnail, hold down the Command key and click. It loads it as a selection. Come back over to your image, click on Add Layer Mask. If you turn off the background layer underneath, you'll see that the girl has been knocked out. Because we're on the pasteboard, I can't see the other image. You can't see multiple images on a pasteboard, so I'm going to hit the F key once to go to the black. Yes? Sure. You duplicated the layer, right? The copy of her. So just go over to your knockout layer, hover over it, hold down the Command key and click. You should have marching ants. And then come back over to the layer that you just created and click on Add Layer Mask, the icon at the bottom that's the square with the circle. Okay, you good? All right, cool. Okay, well, we're now just going to drag the girl onto the other background. So again, with both of these images showing, I'm going to click on the girl layer, drag her on top of the street scene, hold down the Shift key and let go, and it will bring her actually centered into the space. Now, the reason that we don't see the bottom of her is because her image is considerably bigger than this image, but that doesn't matter. The rest of her is still there. If you hit the V key, you can get the move tool, you can actually move her up. You can see she's all still in there. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that just to bring her back into space. I'm going to then just go back into your Finder and open it again. Oh, are you still on the pasteboard? That's what it is, yeah. So hit the F key twice to get back to where you see the little stoplights, and then you're good to go. Yes? All right, perfect, good. I'm going to go back to the image of just the girl, the original, and close this up. Again, you can already see that how confusing this shit's getting. Do not have extra stuff open. You don't need extra stuff open. That'll only drive you crazy. Okay, now clearly there's a mismatch here. When you take a look at this, the girl is way brighter. The color palette is completely different. She's really sort of like almost a little bit of blue in her, whatever, really warm background. All sorts of things are happening here that are not really working really well for me. So our job is going to be to try to fix this part. What I'd like you to do right now, though, is before we do anything, just do a snapshot of this in history so that we can easily go back and refer to a before and after. So I'm just going to click on the camera that's at the bottom of the history palette, and I'm just going to do snapshot number 1. Again, if you're really doing a lot of snapshots to sort of help you get through all this, because your snapshots are history, they're not saved if you close your file, but they're always there as long as you keep the file open. So it's a good habit to get into naming these things. So let's just name this one and we'll call it First Look. Okay, so now we need to figure a few things out. The first thing I need to do is actually see if I can get her in perspective or not and scaled correctly. So to do that, I'm going to temporarily turn her off. I need to find the horizon line for the scene that I'm in, the background scene that I'm in. And we do have converging lines in this. Now, I would stay away from the ones that are in the cobblestone street down at the bottom. I would also stay away from the ones that are the lower part of the building. If you look at the lower part of the building, these windows, they're really sort of cocked and weird. They're not, I mean, it's basically a much, much, much older architecture. The bottom of this building was probably built, who knows, 500 years before the top part. The top part of this is at least far more modern, and so this is actually going to help me figure out where my vanishing lines on this are. So again, I'm going to go back to my pasteboard. I've got all the information that I need. I've got the girl and the background together. I'm going to hit the F key to get back to the pasteboard. And I've got a couple of things that will give me horizon lines. So I know that the tops of the windows right here will actually give me horizon line. I'm a little skeptical, to be honest with you, about the edge where the more refined plaster or concrete part of it actually meets the more pebbly part of it. I don't know that I necessarily trust that, but I do trust the tops of the windows. I also trust the windowsills that are actually on the left-hand side of this. So that's what I'm going to use to find my horizon line. I'm going to hit the P key to get the pen tool. I'm actually going to click on the window ledge that's at the very top, and then I'm going to go all the way to the other side of my screen and then pull this down so that it lines up exactly with the window ledge of the second window. and click once. That gives me one of my converging lines. And then I'm going to do the same thing using the 2 or the 3 little windows that are on the other side. I'm going to ignore the door and all of that stuff. I'm simply going to click on the top of that little window, and then again bring my my path point down till it's hitting it's tracing exactly the same top of the second window and the third window, and I'm going to click, and that gives me another point. Where these two actually converge is my horizon line of this image. So I'm going to click on a guide. So I'm going to come up to my ruler at the very top, click and drag a line down and put it right at the intersection of where those two things cross. Because again, that's going to be the vanishing point of all the converging lines, which actually establishes the horizon line. And then I'm going to go to my path palette and throw it away. Again, it's done everything it needs to do. So now you should have a reasonable horizon line. And if you look at the building, there's a drain that is in the sort of the back of the cobblestone. The horizon line is just a little bit above that. Now, you would say to this, looking at this, well, that's impossible. The horizon line actually belongs much up closer to, it belongs up in this region, up into here. This is where it actually belongs. But it isn't, not based on physics. Make sense? Okay. I'm going to hide this temporarily. Yes?
How close do you think the line has to be to exact?
The thing is that you can see there's always a little bit of wiggle room in here, but you would not want to say, I mean, we're going to play with this a little bit because she's out of perspective, if you want to know the truth. You could come up here, you could try this. Again, once this is going to be a case very similar to the guy in the train station. They're way out of perspective, but we're going to do everything we can to make it believable. So that's why I actually picking this example, is that I don't want this stuff to be also convenient, because a lot of times when you do this stuff, you don't have that option. You're faced with having to put the round peg in the square hole, and if you hit it with a hammer hard enough, most of it will go. And there's compromises. But there's other things that are way out of whack here that are going to be a lot more obvious that we've got to deal with than this. Okay? So, all right, so let's go after the girl. Oh, God, this sounds so wrong. There's 2 lectures that I do in this class, and I ended up saying like that. One of them is that, and we get to it in a couple of classes, there's a bunch of kids that are on a beach, and I use content aware to remove them. And every time I actually go to do this thing, I say, okay, now it's time to kill the kids. And it gets recorded and it goes out on my YouTube channel, and once I was thinking, I was like, oh God, that just sounds so wrong. Or now we gotta go after the kids, and that sounds really wrong. I mean, it just, well, anyway. Command H to get rid of it's not getting rid of the guideline, it's just gonna hide it. If you hit Command H again, it comes right back. So it just, again, I know where it needs to be, I've got it in place, it's not gonna go away, and I can actually use it again. I'm going to go back to my layers palette, and I'm going to turn the girl on. See, that's another thing. I'm going to turn the girl on. Sure. Is that sex or drugs? Like the way you roll. Okay. Wow, this is going really south quick. I didn't expect this. Okay. The girl. So the thing is irrespective of where she is in this space, I've got to scale her correctly. And I know that I've got a known scale in here, and that's actually going to be the door and the intercom that's actually next to the door. But this is one of the reasons, and I told you guys this in the very beginning, why we use smart objects so much in this class, is that we are now going to do multiple transforms to try to get this girl right. And if we leave it the way she is right now, because she's not a smart object right now, every single transform that we do is going to be destructive. And so as we start to do repeated ones, we make her smaller, we make her a little bit larger, we make her smaller again, whatever, all of those are destructive moves. You do not want that part to happen. So we need to convert her to a smart object right now. So to do that, up to the layer menu, again, you guys, there's a million ways of doing it, but up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, and convert to smart object. When you do that, you'll also notice that it actually, the mask is no longer visible to you. We actually now have transparency around that. The mask is still there. It's just inside the smart object. If you want to see the mask, we cannot do this on the pasteboard because, again, the pasteboard can only show us one image. So hit the F key to go to the black pasteboard, hit the F key again to go back to the stoplights, and now if you double click on the smart object, you'll see that she opens up in a very separate layer, and the layer mask is actually sitting right there. So if we needed to refine the layer mask because it wasn't working for us, we could actually do it now in this image. We would change the layer mask and then simply close it up and save the image, and we are right back to where we are started from here. So again, it's a non-destructive move. We should be good to go. So I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool, and I'm actually going to move her again right back to where her feet are standing right next to the entrance to the doorway. Again, I'm trying to place her so it looks like her foot might be sort of like right on the threshold of the door. And then I'm going to hit Command T to get the transform dialog box. I'm going to drag the anchor point down to the very bottom of the dress. I'm going to put it just down in the middle. It doesn't, you can put it on at either foot, it doesn't matter. Because again, I just want to shrink her top down. I don't want her coming from the bottom up and the top down and then have to set her back down again. And this is just faster. And then I am going to click on the link between the width and the height, and I'm going to grab the corner and simply drag her down till I feel like she's at the right size for this door. Now, even though I've still got the transform handles around, I'm going to push her out just a little bit, and I'm going to zoom into this just a little bit to see, because what I'm trying to figure is, you can see there's a notice on the door right here. There's also, there's an intercom that's actually sitting back there on the wall right back here. And I'm trying to think, okay, I come up to a wall, where's the intercom? It's not down here. I don't need to do this to get to the intercom. The intercom is pretty much right at my eye level. So we need to set the intercom pretty much at our eye level, and it's pretty much there, right? So these are the ways you need to start thinking about this kind of stuff, is that, again, where is an intercom relative to me? How tall is a fire hydrant? How tall is a tire of a car? How tall is a parking meter? All of those things are sort of like standards that you can actually then start to scale people against. So, really quickly, do this with me. Jump out to a browser really quickly, and I want you to do a search for parking meter height. How tall is New York City parking meter? 66, 69 inches. 5 feet 9 inches tall. If I shoot a picture in New York and I know that I want to scale a person and I've got a parking meter in my shot, that's about the size of an average woman, model, whatever, in low heels, right? Or if you know that your model's, 5'5", then you know it needs to be slightly shorter than that. I mean, this is, again, exactly how you do this stuff. How tall is a parking cone? I've searched for, you can't believe the shit I've searched for. How tall are bricks? You know, the bricks in your house, like, the standard red brick. How tall is a brick? You can count out the number of bricks that you've actually got and know exactly how tall a person should be relative to those bricks. How many bricks will actually make it? A brick is 2.5 inches tall. Divide your 70 by 70 inches, which is roughly, 5'10", by 2.5. You'll know how many bricks tall she should be, or he should be. Makes sense? All right, back to Photoshop. So I feel like she's scaled about right here. So again, I'm going to zip back out. I am going to go back to my pasteboard. So I can't get back to my pasteboard until I go ahead and commit this transform. So I'm going to go ahead and commit the transform right here. And then we can actually see what she would look like in perspective. So to see what she looks like in perspective, I'm going to double click on the hand so I can see the entire image. I am going to hit Command H to bring back the horizon line, and now you can see the problem that we've actually got. I'm going to hit the V key to move the girl, and if she is going to be in perspective, I'm going to just drag her right to the side, and I'm going to bring her down till the horizon line cuts through her eyeballs, because that's where hers is, and take a look at it. And she's now, look at her in relationship to the door. She's now 2 feet tall. And again, it's because they are so wildly out of perspective. Make sense? So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I'm going to ignore the horizon line part that we've actually got here. I'm simply going to, well, here, you can see we can do the same thing we did with the guy. We can try to transform her in perspective, so I'm going to simply drag her straight to the left. So remember, dragging left and right does not change distance from camera, so you are not changing size, scale, or height. So I've just pulled her out into the middle of the street, or the middle of that lane, but she's still on the same distance away from the camera as the door is, so she's still scaled correctly. But if I want to bring her closer to me, I'm going to try with two different horizon lines. I'm going to pull another one down that goes right through her eyes, and we'll just try to see which of these actually looks better. So with the girl selected, Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. I'm going to drop the anchor point. I'm going to bring her straight to the camera. So I'm going to just drop the anchor point. It's really close right now. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. So, well, actually, that's not right on there, is it? It's almost identical right on there. So Kennedy, this goes right back to your question. It's awfully damn close where she is right now. So again, this is using the horizon line of the landscape. And I'm going to hold down the Shift key and the Option key and click on one of these corners to pull her forward in perspective. And I look at that, and she seems fucking gigantic in this. So that one's not going to work for me. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. She goes back. I'm going to drag the anchor point up onto the top, which is her horizon line. So again, the guideline that's going right through her eyeballs. Hold down the Shift and the Option key and pull the corner forward. And this seems a little bit better to me. This actually seems to feel a little bit more, it's a little bit better to me. She might seem a little bit too small. So again, I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. And then I'm just going to wing this. I'm going to put this anchor point right under her boobs, which is just about half the distance. So I'm splitting the difference between her horizon line and the horizon line of the landscape. Hold down the Shift and the Option key and pull this forward. And this seems to me to make more sense. How do you guys feel? You feel like she fits this scale-wise still a little bit better? It's not always that way. I can't tell you that, yeah, you split the two and it's perfect. I can't tell you that, but this looks right to me. So I'm going to go ahead and accept this and say okay. I'm going to get rid of the guides because they're distracting for me. I don't want to keep the guides on there. So up to the, again, to the view menu, down to clear guides, and it'll get rid of it. So this is my starting point, and she's not so far off. When I look at this image right now, and I'm just talking about the scale of her, I can believe this. I'm not going to look at this and go, oh, she's giant, or she's really small, or I'm going to believe this. Make sense? And if we can get the rest of it right, that'll also work out pretty well for us as well. So we've got a number of things that we've got to do. And the first thing that we're going to do is build check layers to actually try to figure out how we can better match her to the background. That's what I'm going to try to do. Now, conceivably, we could try to make the background match her, but that would lose all the atmosphere of the background, and that wouldn't seem to me to be a real reason to do that. So I think it's much better to make her fit the background. So I want to point this out to you. You should definitely save these PDFs. But if you look into the folder that we're in right now, there's two PDFs. One is called Color Check, and one is just Check Layers, and the other one is Color Matching Methods. We are going to try to get through all of this right now. So again, if you double click on the Color Check Layers, it is just a recipe of how you build these. So this is what we're going to follow as we do this part right now. So just realize that these are here. So if you lose the action, you can't find the action anymore, whatever, this is how you actually go about building them again. But we're going to build this as an action because when you're doing this kind of work, it's just so nice to hit the action. It builds 3 check layers for you and you are good to go. Make sense? All right, so this is what I'm going to follow. The other thing that's in there is actually a color matching system. So what this does is it actually works it through about 2 different ways to try to match the color of the girl to the background. Because if you think you can go in and just whip a curve on this girl and actually start warming her up, good luck with that. You will be doing that for hours. And you will hate your life. And you'll blame me. And I can't live with that. Sounded really dramatic, didn't it? I figured I could do it, so I did. Okay, back into Photoshop. So we're going to build the check layers first. Over to your Actions palette. Click on the menu that's right to the right of the Actions palette. You'll get a flyout, and we're going to say New Action. And we are going to call this action, instead of call it Action 2, I'm going to call it Check Layers. And I'm going to hit Record. And then I'm going to follow the recipe that I've got right here. So I'm just going to actually go through this part. Oh, wow. I've got to rewrite part of this. Hang on one second. I just found a mistake. Okay, don't worry. I'll update that in just a second. Okay, so when people do, the first one we're going to build is for luminosity. And since none of you guys have actually done one before, a lot of people will actually use a black and white layer to check luminosity. I'm going to do this first. I want you to just kill this action. So just come back over to your action palette and click the square button to stop this. I want to build a synthetic file to show you an issue that we've got in terms of perceiving luminosity. So just create a brand new file, Command N to bring up a new file. In mine, I'm going to change the drop-down menu. I'm going to make it 10 by 8 inches. 8 by 10 inches, that's fine. 8-bit color, make it 300 pixels per inch. Again, we've done this 1,000 times in here, guys, just making a synthetic file. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. In this file, I'm actually going to rotate it because I wanted it to be horizontal. So let me just get that 90 degrees rotated. Okay, I'm going to do just square on this. So I'm going to grab the marquee tool, the M key, and I want to actually get my selection up in the very corner because I'm going to do half of this image. It's really hard to get this exactly up in the corner, so what you do instead is simply click and drag out, still holding down your mouse, hit the space bar, and it'll allow you to move this selection and just goose it up into that corner. The marching ants will never go past the corner. Let go, and then you can come down and actually get to the bottom of the image. And then finally, if you come over like close to the center of your image, it should snap to something. In my case, it's not snapping to it, but that's okay. We're good right now. I am going to add a separate layer, another layer on top of that. I've got the marching ants going, and I want to fill this with a pure blue. So I'm going to click on my foreground color to make a pure blue. I'm going to leave my red at 0, green at 0, and B at 255. And it makes a pure blue, and I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And then to fill this half of my image using this blue color, I'm going to simply hit Option Delete. Again, that always fills with foreground color. Command D to deselect. Now I want to actually fill the other half of this guy with yellow. So to do that, I'm going to Command click on the image that's got the blue, which reloads the blue. But now to select the other side of it, I'm simply going to go up to the Select menu and down to Invert Selection. That puts the marching ants around the other half of the image, and I'm going to fill this with yellow. Click on your foreground color to bring open the color picker. Yellow again is made by is a mixture of green and green and red. So 255 for the red. Hit the tab key to come down to green. 255. Hit the tab key and come down to 0 for the blue, and that gives you yellow, and say OK. And then again, it's my foreground color, Option Delete. We'll now fill that with yellow. Command D to deselect. Which of these is brighter? Do you guys agree with Nolan? Is the yellow brighter than the blue? Do you really have this little trust in me? I think everybody thinks I'm trying to set them up and make you look bad. I'm not really trying to do that at all. When you look at this, most people, ask a 4-year-old which of these is brighter, they will tell you the yellow every single time. Ask the 90-year-old, he'll tell you the same thing. She'll tell you the same thing. It seems that way, right?
Because warm colors come forward in space and cool colors recede.
But this, I'm talking about brightness. Which of these is brighter? So this is what will happen. So if you do what a lot of people will tell you with a check layer is to simply drop the saturation on this. Let's try it. Add a hue saturation layer on top of this, and just grab the saturation and drop it all the way down. They are exactly the same brightness, but that is not the way we perceive things. So throw away your hue saturation layer. What other people will do for your luminosity check layer is to tell you to use black and white. So again, we're going to add a black and white adjustment layer on top of this. And when we do this, this actually respects the perceived luminosity that we have. And you can see that the luminosity of the yellow is considerably brighter than the blue. This is how human eyes see. However, this is also based on film response, and that's not necessarily our best friend in this situation. So we are going to do another method that gives us this same perception, but works in a better way. So I'm going to close up the synthetic image. We do not need to save it. We are going to go back to our actions palette. We are going to build this action now. So again, I'm going to go back up, and you can see that I've got my check layers action already here. Again, all we did was start it, but we never made it. Throw that check layer away so that you don't get confused. I just drug it to the garbage can. We're going to come up to the drop-down menu again and do New Action and name it Check Layers. And hit record. So your first move in this is to add a new layer on top of this image. Then we are going, oh, sorry, hang on. That's why this is wrong. Never mind. This is right. Okie dokie. Oh, sorry. I'm totally screwing this up. Kill that action. Just stop it. Throw that layer away. We added the wrong thing. There's a faster way to do this. Throw away the check layers again in the actions part and start all over. One last time, I promise. So, drop-down menu, New Action. Call it Check Layers. And hit record. So your first move is to add a solid color adjustment layer. So we're going to come down to the half circle, half black, half white at the bottom of the layers palette. Click on the drop-down menu or drop-up menu and click on solid color. And the solid color that you want to put into this is we are going to set the hue, so up at the very top, the hue, the H, to 0 degrees. Hit the tab key to come down. We're going to set the saturation to 0. Hit the tab key to come down. We're going to set the brightness to 50. It's giving us an exact middle gray. This is actually what we want in all of this. Go ahead and say OK to this, and then change the blending mode of this check layer to color. This will actually give us our luminosity check layer. And I'm going to drag my layers to the side so that I can actually see the name. And I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to rename it Luminosity Check. So that's our first check layer, is for luminosity.
Where are the numbers again?
For the number that you filled in,
Yeah.
0 for the hue, 0 for the saturation, 50 for the brightness. And then say OK. And then change the blending mode of that layer to color. All the way at the bottom. And then rename that layer Luminosity Check. Your action will rename your layers for you, and you need to know what this one is. Good? Okay. Next layer, we are going to come down to, again, we're going to add another adjustment layer here. So click on Add an Adjustment Layer. And this one we are going to do Selective Color. Make sure that this selective color, again, I'm just now looking in the Properties panel right here. Make sure that it is set to Absolute. Mine is. We are going to change the color sliders here. We've actually done versions of this for our selective color, but this is different, so don't confuse this with zero selective color. We're actually going to start with the reds up here, and we are going to actually drag the black slider all the way to the right, minus 100. You need to do that for every color. So go to the next color down to the yellows, and we're only moving the black slider. Drag the black slider all the way to the left to that minus 100. Come down to the greens and do the same thing. Drag the slider all the way to the left. The cyans, drag that slider all the way to the left. The blues, drag the black slider all the way to the left. The magentas, the black slider all the way to the left. And then when you get to the colors, the whites actually here, you take them in the black slider in the opposite direction. So take the black slider all the way to the right, plus 100. The neutrals, the black slider all the way to the right, plus 100. And then finally the blacks, the black slider all the way to the right. This is actually going to give, and then once we get those, this is going to give us our saturation map. Hang on one second here. And then, yeah, we're actually going to, double click on this name, and we're going to call it saturation. Check. And I think, hang on just one second. Okay, and then finally we've got one last to do, and it's actually going to be our color check layer here. So we're going to add one more adjustment layer. So again, click on the adjustment layer, and we are going to do another solid color. And when the layer comes up, click on again the hue, and for the hue we're going to set it to 0 again. I'm going to hit the tab key just to go down to saturation. For the saturation, I'm going to hit 0 again. And then for my brightness, I'm going to come down again, and I'm going to put in 50% for the brightness. And then the blending mode here, we are going to set this. Go ahead and say OK. And then the blending mode in the drop-down menu, we're going to set all the way down to the bottom to luminosity. And then we are going to rename this color check. And then, then we're just going to leave this part right here. And in this case, then, I'm going to stop my action. So I'm going to park this guy back over in my layers palette. And to see how these work, actually turn off the top two layers. And you'll see that the very first one we created it's a luminosity check. And you can clearly see that the girl is brighter than the entire background. So this indicates our problem here. She's too bright for this. If you turn the background, the luminosity check over, I'm going to move my layer palette over here so that we can read them. I'm going to click on saturation. And in the saturation check, what you see here, what a saturation check layer does is that it actually maps saturation to brightness. So you can see that in this case, the background right here, the lower part of the background right here is very, very dark. It has no saturation in it. But the skirt or the dress is really saturated. So this whole black to white scale is showing you saturation mapping. Does that make sense what this is? So again, the lighter it is, the more saturated it is. So turn this eyeball off on it, and you can see that the dress is the most saturated thing in this. And so when we click on it, it actually shows that. The next most saturated thing in this is the yellows of the building. And you can see that they are considerably lighter than the background down here. This is saturation mapping, and you can see that the general tone of the girl does not match these backgrounds. And so we're going to have to actually fix that part. And then finally, the last one, if you turn on, is the very top one, the check layer for color. These two, again, are showing the extreme differences in color. The extreme difference of this red that you're seeing in the skirt and the rest of the building is showing us our color mismatch, the exact problem that we're having in this scenario. Does this make sense to everybody what's going on here? Are we good on this part?
Which modes color be set to?
So what?
Which layer blending mode should the color be set to?
Luminosity.
Luminosity?
So you can see now why this is so much easier just to have these things already made, run this action, and you're good to go. Are we good on this part? Okay, so we're going to actually start working with these guys first. The first thing, though, that I'm going to start with is, and that's typically what I'll do, is the luminosity, because the luminosity is going to have a huge impact on this. So I'm going to turn on my luminosity check layer. I'm going to turn everything else off. I'm going to come up above the girl now. So what I need to do is I need to put curves and adjustment layers on this to control just the girl, not the background. So the first thing I'm going to go after is the luminosity. And what I'm trying to do is I want this to look like a believable black and white photograph. There's nothing about this that looks believable. She is way too bright for this scene. So my first move is to, again, I keep my layers palette, I typically work on a much larger monitor, not that I'm bragging, but it's so much easier to be able to see the names of this stuff so that you do not get this confused, because we're going to start adding adjustment layers here to control this, and this starts to get really complicated. Actually, I'm going to move this down out of the way here a little bit, because I need to be able to, I want to see the names of this, but I also need to be able to get to my properties panel that's up at the top so that I can actually control this stuff. So I'm going to just change how this looks a little bit, and hopefully this will give me enough to work with. Okay, so the first move is always luminosity. I actually do these in the order that you sort of see them in. Now, when you get to some of the later ones, like when you change the color or start to do any of this kind of stuff, whatever, it can actually have an impact on your luminosity, but that's why we use adjustment layers. So sometimes it's an iterative thing. You come back and forth and you'll change things. So, but my first move is going to be this. This part's critical, so I need everybody to sort of pay attention to this part and the way this works. The first thing that I'm going to add on here is a curve to control the brightness of the girl. So I'm going to add an adjustment layer. So click on Add the Adjustment Layer. Come up and we're going to put a curve on this. However, two things right away you need to do right away when you do this. The first one is that you need to clip this curve to the girl. Because again, we only want this to control the girl. We do not want this to control the whole scene. So to do that, hover your cursor between the curve and the girl, hold down the Option key, and you'll get the little square with the arrow that points down, and click on it, and this will actually clip the curve to the girl. You'll see now there's a little arrow that points down. And if we come over here and grab our curve, you can see as you start to shift your curve up and down, it does not impact the background. It only impacts the girl. Now, the problem that I have with the girl is majorly in the highlights. That's where this is the most severe for me. What most of you guys are used to doing when you're using curves to control luminosity is you grab a point here in the middle and you click and you drag it up or down. That is not going to help our highlights. The highlights are anchored all the way up here in the top corner. So no matter how hard I pull this thing down, those highlights on that girl still stay anchored up in the top. That's why she doesn't match. So I'm going to tear this point off. Instead, what you want to do is grab the anchor point that is at the very top in the whites of that curve, and you're going to click and start to pull them down until the girl actually matches. But we've made one mistake. I told you there were two things that we needed to do first. The first was to clip this. The second is to change the blending mode of this to luminosity. So the curve, we're clicking on the blending mode all the way down to luminosity. What this will do is it will actually make the girl darker or lighter, but it will not impact the color of the girl, which is, we're going to use a different layer to actually do that. So I'm actually going to, for the girl right here, I'm going to grab the white point and I'm going to simply click and drag it down until she matches the scene or matches it better. Yes?
Can you please show how you clipped it to the girl again?
Hover over the, put your cursor right between the two layers. Hold down the Option key.
Oh, I see it.
And click.
All right, got it.
All right, so click your white point and drag it down until the girl matches the scene. So I get it down, in my case, I've got an input-output of 255 to 153 if you guys want yours to be the same. But you can see right now, this is, doesn't this look more like a real black and white photograph would actually look in this situation? This is what using check layers is all about. Does this sort of make sense to everyone? Okay, I'm going to turn off my luminosity check now and just see. Now, I've still got a color mismatch and I've got a saturation mismatch going on in here, but at least this is the sort of the beginning of where I want to start with this. So the next thing that I go after is color. Now, a lot of people will say you do this. You go ahead and click on your color check and you can see that basically these two should share the same color palette, and they don't. The dress is like radically off. I've got a whole lot more yellow in this and a whole lot less here. I actually do two tricks to try to get the color adjusted first. Some people will just put a curve on this and start wildly trying to do it, or they'll do it with color balance. I don't do it with either of those. So I'm going to show you the most advanced method that I use. I think it's actually the best one to use. So I'm going to leave this where it is right now. I'm going to reopen the girl. No, I'm not going to reopen the girl up. I'm going to reopen a copy of the background up again. Actually, I take that back. I don't need to do any of this. I'm going to turn off my check layer right now. I'm going to turn off the girl. The curve is not having any impact on this image at all. I need to come up with the color palette of this image. And there's a number of ways of doing it. I'm going to show you the way that I do it. So come over to the File menu. Again, this is all written out in a recipe for you guys. Come down to the File menu and come down to Export.
Wait, what happens if you get back to the color? I'm still on black and white.
So simply turn off the luminosity check. That's simple. And turn off the girl. You don't want to see her either. All right, and I'm going to select the background copy. So up to the File menu, down to Export, down to Save for Web Legacy. So look up at my screen to see where I'm at. File menu, down to Export, down to Save for Web Legacy. Everybody good on this part? This guy will actually open up. And you'll see there's tabs along the very top. It doesn't really matter which one of these you click on the top. You can have the original optimized. I have mine always on 4up because this is how I use to convert my files for web. But we're not even going to use JPEG. So over on the right-hand side in the drop-down menu where it says JPEG, you want to click on the drop-down menu and come down to GIF. That will actually change the things that are sort of the layout that's actually in here. In terms of the number of colors, you will see that you get a number of colors that is right under the thing that says GIF across from it. You get another drop-down menu. You can also type a number in here. I'm actually going to put in 4. Typically, you work between 3 and 4 colors here. And what you will now see is that there is a color table that's being generated. These are the colors. If you were to strip everything out of this image and reduce it to only 4, its 4 most dominant colors, these are the 4 most dominant colors right here. Does everybody have the color table and have 4 colors in it? Great. There's a drop-down menu right across the right from the right-hand side. If you click on that drop-down menu, you can come down here and you can say, I want to save this color table. And we're just going to save it. A dialog box will open up and it'll say, what do you want to call this thing? And I'm going to call it street color table, something, whatever. We'll call it street. Sorry. And you need to figure out a place to put it. Typically, most people would put it right next to their image. And so that's where I'm going to put mine. So I'm going to go to my Columbia drop-down menu and do this in names. Come to my retouching class, session 9, in my folder, and the Pix and Perfect composite part. And I'm going to save it there. It's just so that you know where it is. We've now actually saved this color table and we can use it. Your work here is done. So we don't need to stay here anymore. We can actually cancel out of that. I just needed it to build the color table for me. We good on that part? Okay, this is where it's going to get a little trickier, but stay with me on this. So I'm going to turn the girl back on. I'm going to click on her so that she's the active layer. Actually, I'm going to do this above the curve that we use to actually make her darker. So I'm clicking on the curve that's actually clipped to her, that's actually made her darker, And I'm going to add another adjustment layer to this that's going to deal with my color. So click on this drop down, the add adjustment layer icon at the bottom. You want to actually add a gradient map to this, not a gradient. You'll notice that there's a gradient up at the top. That's not the one you want. You want the gradient map. And when you click on the gradient map, in most cases, the image will actually come up, depending on what you've got. In most cases, it makes your image black and white. In my case, mine's inverted right now, but I'm not going to worry about that because I'm going to reset this gradient map anyway. So did your rolls turn out just black and white? Normal? Did it turn out inverted like mine or just normal? It's totally white? Well, we still should be able to do it because it's the right thing. It's a gradient map. So what a gradient map does is that it allows you to match tone to tone or color to color, which is what we're really going to do in here. So to use this, the first thing, and this is the thing that will fuck everyone up, is that if you look at the adjustment layer that we just put on here, the mask is what's selected. We can't adjust the gradient map with the mask selected. So you'll see the little brackets are around this gradient map. We also need to clip this gradient map to the girl. So again, I'm going to do a couple of other adjustments here first. The first thing I'm going to do is hover between the gradient map and the layer that's right underneath it. And I'm going to hold down the Option key and click to go ahead and clip that down. Then I'm going to change the blending mode of this from normal down to color, because that's what we're going to do. We're going to be changing its color. And then finally, this is where the fuck up happens. The mask of this gradient map is what is selected. We need to select the map itself, the properties. So click on the icon that's right next to it so that when we edit the gradient map, we will actually edit this to be impact. Otherwise, when you click this open, it's going to try to actually adjust the gradient of the mask, and that will not help you at all. Are we good on this part? I know this is confusing, guys, but this will change your life. This will actually make things, you can't believe where this is going. So now we need to actually get to those colors. So to get to the colors, you can leave your gradient map on here. We need to actually get to our swatches panel. So to do that, we typically don't have this thing visible. Come up to the window menu, come down to swatches. So when swatches will actually open up, you'll see it usually opens up. This has got a color thing next to it as well. Yours may look slightly different than mine, but you should basically just have color swatches that are running at the top and then a bunch of things that are options that you can open up. Does everybody have this? Okay, we need to load that color table that we just made. To do that, come up to the menu that's to the right of swatches, click on the drop-down menu, and come down to import swatches. Sorry. Has everybody got import swatches? And then you need to navigate to that table that you just made and the thing that we just named. So again, I put mine in my retouching folder. Sorry, my Columbia retouching folder. And version 9, teacher, fix and perfect. And I'm going to click on my street color table and open it. And yes? You were saving, so you saved the color table. Did you give it a name?
Yes.
Or did you just call it, if you don't give it a name, it'll just call itself table.
It's street color table.
Yeah.
It's a .gif. It won't let me open it.
It's not a .tif. So do yours really quickly again.
Sorry.
It's all right. So cancel out of all of this, cancel out. You can leave that open or cancel, it doesn't matter. So turn the girl off. Turn both the adjustment layers off, select the background. Perfect. Come up to File, Export, in the middle. Yeah, over to Save for Legacy. And that part's right. All of this is right. So click on that drop down menu and do Save Color Table. And you can just leave it called table if you want to. And just put it in a place where you know it will actually go. So yeah, throw it on your desktop.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and that's fine. And then hit done. Or cancel. And then again, open up Swatches window. Swatches. And then we're going to click on the drop down, import swatches, and then navigate to that same spot. And it's called, and hit open.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect, and then scroll down to the bottom. If you scroll down to the very bottom of this, you'll see it says table at the bottom. Or it should have your whole name at the bottom. So street color table. If you click on this and open it up, those are the swatches that we're actually going to use to build our color matching part. Now I'm just going to move this guy over to the other side because you need to keep your color swatches visible when we actually build the gradient map. So you can see in our color swatches, and what I've basically got here is I've got the yellow, which is the brightest of my colors. I've got the black, which is next to it, the darkest of our colors. And then I've got sort of two midtones in here. One is a little bit lighter than the other. It's those sort of browns in here. We are going to use the gradient map to map this girl to that color. So this is how you do it. Again, go back to your gradient map. Make certain that the gradient map itself is selected. It's got the little brackets around it, not the mask. This happens a lot in this, and that will actually screw you up. With this selected, you can actually see up in your Properties panel, there is a gradient. You simply click on the gradient, and it will actually open up the thing that allows you to build your gradient map. So to do this, what we're going to do is we are going to actually start again. What this thing is inverted right now. It doesn't matter. We're changing all the colors of this anyway. I'm going to start with the color that's on the very far right-hand side. Again, these are going to be my lightest tones. This works just like a histogram. The colors that we select are the ones on the bottom. You don't select the ones that are on the top. We actually select the ones that are on the bottom. So simply click on the point that's actually at the very bottom. So again, look at my screen to see where I'm at. It's the bottom sort of color sampler stop that's underneath the gradient itself. Click on it, and it will actually open up the editor for you. And you can see in the editor that you can actually click on a color. So underneath this, there's the color swatch. You click on that. It brings open the color picker, and this is going to be our lightest color. So come over to your color street table in the swatches and click on the yellow color. Now when you click on this yellow color, you need to actually, so it sets the color for you, which is what we want, but the positioning matters. So look at the brightness value that we've got. So look up at my screen again really quick. The brightness value that we've got right here in the color table. You need to remember that value because that's the value that we need to put in for location for this stop. So again, mine is 94%. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And then in location, I'm going to put in 94. And that sets the color at the proper luminance value that it should be for this value that we're working with right now. Does that make sense to everyone? OK, we're going to continue this. I'm going to now do my darkest stop. So I'm going to go down to the bottom and I'm going to click on it, and again it will actually give me a way to color edit this. I'm going to click on the color sampler tool. In the color sampler tool, I'm now going to pick on my darkest color. It's not really a black, it's very dark, but it's almost a black. But anyway, I'm going to click on my darkest one because this is going to be my darkest stop, and I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. Again, I'm going to look at my brightness value because this is the location of this, and it says 10%. So I'm going to say OK to this. And then in location, I'm going to put in 10. And that sets this now at the correct range. Now, if I did nothing more, the girl would actually be considerably closer to this, but I can set mid-tone values, and that's what I want to do next. We need to add color stops to do this. And it doesn't matter where you put them, because again, we are going to use that brightness trick to set our location for us anyway. So I'm going to come up, and it's sort of like, just sort of like in the area, darker than the lightest, but sort of like, I'm just going to click in this area. If you just click, it adds another color stop for you. Again, I'm going to click on that color stop to make it active. It's the same editing trick for all of this. I'm going to click on my color to bring open the color picker. The lighter of my two browns, I think it's the sort of yellowish orangey brown. That's the one I'm going to use as the lighter of my midtones. So I'm going to again click on that color swatch. It sets the color correctly for me, but now look at the brightness. The brightness is 56 and my location is a 72. So I need to just remember the 56. I'm going to say okay to this and then type in for my location 56. And then finally, I'm going to click one more time right between the darkest and that midtone that I just made to set my last color. Again, it puts down another color sampler. I'm going to click on the color sampler little sample to bring open the color picker. I'm going to click on the darker of those the two sort of midtones. Again, I'm looking at my brightness right here. It's saying 35, so I'm going to say okay to this. And I'm going to type in my location as 35. This is now my gradient map for the girl. And if actually you take this to the side and look at the girl, you can see that this is considerably more the color palette that she was at to begin with. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. This again is my gradient map. My gradient map is set to color, so I'm actually pretty good to go here. Now in this case, I think this is a little extreme, and this is what usually happens in here. You can simply take this gradient map and drop the opacity of this down until this looks correct to you, until it feels like, yep, she's in that color range here. It's actually looking pretty good to me. I'll bump it up a little bit more. So I'm feeling roughly, I ended up with around a 62% in this. And if you turn your gradient map on and off, you can see what a radical shift this has actually made in all of this. Does this make sense to everyone? You can close up your swatches. Does the girl look like sort of the coloring of the scene to you guys? To check it, come back up now and click on your color check and look what has actually happened. You can actually see that things have changed considerably. Primarily her skin tone. If you turn the gradient map on and off, you'll see that her skin tone has changed dramatically. So is the saturation of this has changed dramatically as well. This is a much better match to this. You can actually use your gradient map. So I've got the gradient map. I've got my color check layers turned on, but I've still got my gradient map is selected. You can actually play with your opacity slider here to sort of see a better fix in all of this for you in here. Sometimes it's easier to see it this way, sometimes not so much in here. Again, I think that probably eyeballing this without that guy on there is probably a better mark on here. But I'm feeling pretty good about her in this sort of situation right now. So my color check layer has actually confirmed what I've just done in all of this. Is this making sense? Is this working for you guys? All right, I'm going to do one last thing. It's going to be the saturation check, and I'm going to, again, click on my saturation. And now you can actually see that because I made that shift in color change, that my saturation map is now much, much more consistent with the rest of my image. Ironically, I may have to actually boost the saturation of this girl a little bit, because again, I'm looking for this to sort of feel like everything is somewhat even. So if I do want to add a saturation adjustment layer on here, I'm going to do it above my gradient map. So again, I'm going to come down and click on Add Adjustment Layer, and I'm going to add a Hue Saturation Adjustment Layer. Again, I'm going to clip this immediately. You should clip immediately and then change blending modes immediately. I'm going to hover between the Hue Saturation layer and the gradient map that I just created. Hold down the Option key and click to clip the Hue Saturation to the girl alone. Then I'm going to change the blending mode of my Hue Saturation down to Saturation, because that's the only thing I want to change in here. And then I'm going to grab my saturation slider and I'm actually going to boost it up a little bit and see if I can't get the skirt to match the sort of field and background a little bit better. And I feel like I got a boost of like 18%. We'll see what it looks like without the check layer. Turn the check layer off and then turn the Hue Saturation on and off. And she definitely needs a little bit more of that saturation in her dress. Are we good on this part? All right, I'm going to reset my workspace. We're almost done, guys. So with all of this madness going on, you can sort of see the advantages of this. She is actually color matched to this. She's scaled right. She's as close to being in perspective as we can get. The luminosity on this, I think, matches. If you felt like the luminosity, maybe that made her a little bit too dark or a little bit too light, simply go back and revisit your luminosity adjustment layer, the one that's just above her. You might actually bump that up a little bit or pull that down a little bit, but I actually think we were right where it belonged. That part made sense to me. What doesn't make sense to me right now is the direction of the light. If you look at the lights that are here on the building, aren't they all coming from the left-hand side? But look at the light on her. It's coming from the right-hand side. We need to flip the girl. So select the girl, come up to the image menu, down to image rotation, actually up to edit menu instead, down to transform, and then down to flip horizontal, and it'll throw her the other direction. And now she makes sense more in the light that's actually in the scene. Are we good on this part? Okay. Something I wanted to get to today, but I want to finish this. So I'm going to change your assignment, which you guys are going to be thrilled about. But at any rate, so to finish this off, the first thing I'm going to do is actually build a quick shadow for the girl. So I'm going to click, remember, I want shadow to be between figure and background. So click on the background. I'm going to add a new layer to this. I'm going to double click on it and call it shadow. And say OK to that. Hit the G key to get the gradient tool. My gradient tool is now set up to, again, foreground to background. Yellow is my foreground color. I don't want a yellow shadow. I'm going to hit the D key to default my colors to black and white. Make sure black is your foreground color. Come up here just into the middle of the image, click and drag down to pull a gradient. This is exactly what we did before. Command T to transform the gradient. Hold down the Option key and crush this down, and you can actually pull it out even wider. You don't need to only make things smaller. You can actually make them bigger. And I'm going to drag this, and I'm going to put it right underneath the girl to sort of anchor her down in that space. If you find that your tool wants to sort of snap up and down, it won't really go where you want it to actually go exactly, you can use the arrow keys that will actually let you tap it down. So I'm just going to tap this down a little bit. Or a little bit here, and I'm going to go ahead and hit the check mark and say OK to this. Now again, you can see that the shadow has helped truly anchor her into this space, although I think the shadow is going a little bit to the sides too much. So I'm going to bring on my tablet again. I'm going to hit the E key to get the eraser and make it a little bit larger. And I'm going to erase these edges that are right next to her. That shadow would not come off the sides of her. There's nothing to create the shadow. It's got to be underneath her body, not anywhere else. So this part actually looks good for me, but now I need to emulate the lighting fall off on this, because you can see right now that this image is, all the light is coming from the top. And the light on her is, it's a little bit top heavy, but it's also relatively flat. And I want to actually change that part of it as well. So the final things that I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to come to the top of my adjustment layer stack. I've done the 3 adjustment layers. Again, I'm going to pull my layer stack to the side so you can see all of the names. So again, I've got my curves on here. I'm going to name my number 1 curves. I'm going to call it luminosity, because it was changing the luminosity. My gradient map is actually the color change. My hue saturation layer is exactly what it is, so I'm going to leave it as hue saturation layer. But I'm going to come up on the top here, and I'm going to add one more blank empty layer on this. So I'm going to add a blank layer on the top of this, but I want to clip this to the girl, because I want to change the lighting that's on her, but I don't want to change the lighting that's on the rest of my image. So again, I'm going to hold down the Option key and hover right between the two and click on this. And I'm going to call this, let's call this light fall off. And to do it, while you're going to work in this layer right here, I am actually going to change its blending mode also to luminosity. So in my light fall off layer here, I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to make it a really large brush. You want this to be as big as, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to create the light fall off that's sort of starting at her waist and going down. That's going to be the aim on this. But I need it to not have a hard line on it. So I'm going to click and change to a completely soft brush. It is going to be a normal brush, 100% opacity, 100% flow. Make sure that black is your foreground color. I can't get my brush off. Again, every time I try to get my brush off, again, it turns back into the cursor. So I'm going to go to my pasteboard, F key, and now I can actually get the brush down, and I'm going to use the middle of the brush that's down near her feet. That's because that'll be the strongest part. So I'm going to continue to make my brush larger so that I get that softer edge up by her waist. I'm going to continue to make it harder like this. It's one click, guys. You just drop your cursor down into this layer with just one click, and it actually builds darkness that comes down on this. Now, in my opinion, and you'll see if you want to see what that layer looks like, this is what it looks like. That's, well, take that back. Oh, it's only going to show it because it's been clipped. Let me unclip it really quick, and then I'll show you what it looks like. That's what it looks like. Actually, and that's, yeah, and I am in doing what exactly I needed to do. I was still in that foreground to background color. But I feel like this is too strong. The drop-off is too hard, so I'm simply going to pull back the opacity of this to make it a little bit darker. Now, I'm going to do the same trick one more time because I feel like, and this also needs to clip back to her. It makes, I need the bottom of the dress to even be darker still, so I'm going to add one more layer to this. I'm going to call it Light Fall Off 2. And again, clip it. Sorry. Change its blending mode to luminosity. And then I'm going to do a much smaller brush so that I just hit the bottom harder. And pop that down, and again, drop its opacity back. Now that's really brought up that my shadow is in the wrong spot. So I'm going to go back to my shadow and simply click on it, hit the V key to get the move tool, and simply use my arrow keys to tap the shadow up so that it actually falls right underneath her skirt. I'm going to double click on the hand. I'm going to reset my workspace. I'm going to hit the F key to go to my black pasteboard, the F key once again to go to my regular spot. Double click on the hand again and do a color history snapshot of this. And I'm going to call this Final. And say OK to that. And then go up to the top of my history palette and look at my first look and where I'm at now. Awesome, right? I can't believe I actually got through this. I did it at the expense of one of your assignments, but that's okay. You guys need a break. Spring break couldn't be coming at, well, actually spring break could have come at a better time. It could have come today, but given that it's going to be next week. Anyway, so are there questions about this? I know that this is a lot. We've gone through so much today, but you guys have now got, do not fucking do this week. Don't work on it next week. Take your time off, get a break, get rejuvenated, get some energy back again, and then jump into this. But this is a game changer. If you've ever cared about compositing or wanted to know how to do it, this was it. Okay, so as far as your assignment goes, what we did not get to today, so if we go back again into your assignment folder, what the assignment says, there's two parts to it. It says to shoot a real background image and create a composite using, you will see that there's two files that I've given you, Comp Body 1 and Comp Body 2. They're both sitting right here. I've already done figures for you and I've already knocked them out. I want you to use either of those figures. And you're going to create a real composite. You can use any image that you already have of a background, anything that you want. You can use found imagery online. I don't care. It just needs to be real. It needs to be not something that's fabricated. What we didn't get to today is how to create a synthetic background, and that would be the assignment, second part of your assignment. So the second part of your assignment says here, create a background that's entirely man-made. You do not need to do this until we go over that the next time we meet. Are we good on that part? And then you need to start thinking about bringing content for your final project to class. So what does that mean? It can be anything. Right now, if you've started to actually shoot your final project, bring those files. Let's look at it, talk about it. If not, that's fine. If you've only got like a concept board for your final project, start to bring that. It can be collected, it can be found imagery. This is the thing that I'm thinking about doing. This is what I'm going to do. We need to start getting into that process so that you can start getting feedback on your idea to refine your final project. Does that make sense? Any questions about any of this? You still love me? Okay, good. I'll see you guys. I'll see you guys in like 2 weeks, right? Unless I've really screwed this up, in which case I'm in deep trouble. All right, I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.